Welcome to Module 1 of the MELI Unit's Data Analysis and Reporting course. In this module, we will introduce you to the basics of data cleaning. Let's get started. So what do we mean by data cleaning? Data cleaning is the process of identifying incomplete, inaccurate, and/or irrelevant parts of a dataset and making corrections by modifying, replacing, or deleting the, quote, dirty data. In this module, we will focus on using Microsoft Excel, a widely available tool for data cleaning, analysis, and visualization. Before we dive into what those corrections and modifications might look like, let's talk housekeeping. You will want to make sure your raw data and clean data are kept separate in different worksheets. This is a best practice regardless of which tool you use. You always want to make sure you keep an original copy of your raw data and that you are not simply overwriting it. This is important because if you make a mistake, you can always go back to the original raw data set. This also means you can always go back to the data at a later date and run different analyses. Once you have your file set up, you will want to do an initial review of your raw data. Quite literally, you want to look at your data. Open up the Excel spreadsheet and read the first, let's say 5 to 10 lines of data. You can also scroll up and down and sideways. You might see a lot of missing values or that later columns are incomplete, which would indicate a lower completion rate of your survey. Once you've taken a look at your data, you want to look at some basic numbers about your data, such as the total number of responses, so how much data are you working with, the completion rate, so what percentage of people who started the survey actually finished it, and the average duration. How long did it take people to take the survey? These are called metadata, data about your survey. During your initial review of the data, you should calculate some basic statistics for some of your questions. And now, for anyone who may need a quick refresher, let's go over the core metrics you might want to consider looking at. For our refresher, we will use this simple data set: 13, 18, 13, 14, 13, 16, 14, 21, and 13. First, the mean, which is the average of a given set of observations. For this data, that would be 15. Is the median, which is the middle value of a given set of observations when they are ordered from lowest to highest value. For this data set, that would be 14. The mean and median are intended to provide an indication of a typical or middle value of a set of data. However, the mean can be affected by any single value being too high or too low compared to the rest of the values in the data set. This is why it is helpful to also have the median as the midpoint value. And we'll talk a little bit about this relationship a little later on in this module. Next is the minimum value, which is the smallest value in a given set of observations. For this data set, that would be 13. Finally, the maximum, which is the largest value in a given set of observations. For this data set, that would be 21. Calculating the minimum and maximum can help you identify any outliers, any value outside the range of which you would expect. For example, if you had any negative values, calculating the minimum would help you catch that. Finally, calculating these basic statistics, mean, median, minimum, and maximum, are helpful in understanding your data. With these, you can begin to understand the distribution of your data. Also, at the end of your data cleaning, you can recalculate these metrics again. You can recalculate these metrics to compare how your data cleaning has affected the data. All of this is, of course, completely optional, but can be a helpful tool. All right, so we've set up our data files and we've done an initial review of the data. Now that you're ready to dive in, you might be asking yourself, So what am I looking for when cleaning my data? We'll start with outliers. These are data points that differ significantly from other observations. For example, say that the majority, let's say 24, of respondents' businesses' monthly sales are within the $1,000 to $2,000 range, but 3 respondents have sales over $8,000 a month. This can sometimes significantly inflate your mean. When we calculate the mean with the outliers included, we get about $2,200. But when we calculate the mean with the outliers excluded, we get about $1,500, almost $1,000 less. This is a good reminder of why it's important to calculate both your mean and median as part of data cleaning, as they can help you identify any outliers in your data set. We may also need to deal with incomplete responses, which occur when a respondent completes at least one answer in a survey but does not finish the entire survey. You will need to think through whether the response gives you valuable information and make the determination whether to keep the response. When deciding whether the response is valuable, you want to weigh the following. How far did the respondent get in the survey? Did they only answer the demographic questions, for example? Or did they only respond to 5 questions in a 40-question survey? Did they miss complete sections of your survey? And what is your overall response rate? If you have a very low response rate, you might want to lean more towards keeping responses versus removing them. For example, consider this first response. Here, the respondent only agreed to take the survey, but did not give us any other information. For all intents and purposes, this response is empty. Whereas the second response, we see that the respondent got at least a little bit further along. We would likely delete the first response as it contains no valuable information, but would probably opt to keep the second response, since the respondent got to at least a couple of our actual survey questions, and we don't want to lose that data. Anytime a survey contains open-ended questions, you will inevitably have to deal with typographical errors, or typos. These are the mistakes that people make when typing something. Here, respondents were asked to write in the name of their city, and you can see multiple examples of how they wrote that in. You can see the first response is missing the A. The second did not include the accent over the A, while the third is the actual correct spelling we're looking for. In order to aggregate all of the people who responded Bogota, you are going to have to clean and make sure that Bogota is spelled the same for every single response. This is the type of issue you want to try and avoid by making as many answer options as possible in your survey multiple choice, so that you don't have to clean so much data later on. And lastly, you may end up with duplicate values in your data set. Duplicates are a response pattern that occurs twice or more. So maybe you have a survey cohort of 25 people, but you end up with 27 responses. That would be an indication that you have duplicate responses. When dealing with duplicates, you always want to ask yourself, do you actually have enough information to determine if the responses are truly duplicates? Let's look at an example. In this survey, we collected some basic demographic information, including name, home country, age, and gender, which means that we can say with a pretty high degree of certainty that these 2 responses are duplicate entries. In which case, we would delete the entry that is least complete. But let's look at another example. Here, we do not have the same level of detail in our demographics, having only asked for home country, age, and gender, which in this case means we cannot know with 100% certainty that these 2 entries are actually duplicates or not, we would need more information, such as details provided in open-ended responses, to make that determination. And that's it for our module on data cleaning. When you're ready, you can head back to the training overview and move on to Module 2 on quantitative data analysis.